All right, here we are. We are live on Facebook once again. This is Accuracy in America. My name is Don Irvine, and joined from miles and miles away in a bunker, Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, and dog-faced pony soldiers.
Yes, I think you've gotten it down. It's good, right? It's got a good rhythm and everything.
That's a lot of names to be like, slinging at people that you hope will vote for you.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Curious strategy. You idiots. I'm the guy.
And we're talking about this. I mean, 4 years later, right? Yeah. I mean, this all started really 4 years ago or so. It's crazy. It's just crazy. All right, let's get into it. We'll start off and we'll talk a little bit about COVID here because it's out there. It's something we can't ignore, and there's just a lot of media stories here, which is what I'm going to get your opinion about in terms of the number of cases that are out there, the spike in the cases is reported by the media, all of these types of things. Hospitalizations apparently are on the increase and things like that. I mean, what's your feeling about this, and how does this affect the campaign?
Well, I think the purpose of this reporting is to bolster the Biden campaign. The cases are not a big factor because most of the people don't get sick. They don't really need much medical attention. They may have it. And it's like you may have the flu, you may have a cold, right? But there's the idea that like, oh, it's coming back to get us again is nonsense, because what we're getting now is a lot weaker than what those first people were getting in, February, March, April, right? This is it's been through people, and the really killer elements of the virus get on people and kill them. And then, the virus dies with them, right? So it's not we need to be still arcing towards reopening. There's nothing that has come out in the last few days that should change our perspective on that at all.
Yeah, that's an interesting point there, because there's more things I'm going to ask you about. But there was an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day talking about the differences in how different parts of the country have reacted to this, and so they looked at the South, and they said that the South has had they've had ups and downs with the cases. Some places been hit harder than others, but by and large, most of the governors in the South decided to go and start reopening. Therefore, they have more people working, more things are coming back at a more rapid rate. They are in far better economic shape than lots of other parts of the country that said, oh no, we can't, we got to wait till this thing is, eradicated.
Right. What is it? It's like unemployment in Democrat controlled states that have not opened up is something like 70% higher than unemployment in states that have opened up. In Texas, it's back below 6%. You're not far from full employment in Texas, and it's still not reopened completely. Also the closing strategy, I don't know that I believe in it, because New York still has more deaths than Texas and California combined, right? So, and almost as many as Texas, California, and Florida combined. So, who did not do this right? Wasn't Trump. It wasn't DeSantis. It wasn't the guy Abbott in Texas. It wasn't even Gavin Newsom in California. It was Cuomo, Phil Murphy, people in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Those are the places that have been hit the hardest. And it's because their response to it has been the most restrictive.
Yeah, though I don't think we want to give Gavin Newsom much of a pass here, right?
He cooperated with what Trump was trying to do as much as he's done some destructive things, and I'm sure that anyone watching us in California right now is throwing stuff at the computer or whatever, and I don't blame him. But he has been a lot closer to.
You can contact Brian directly at.
I mean, he's been closer to Greg Abbott in this than he's been to Andrew Cuomo, right? I mean, you would agree with that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and he has worked with Trump on the the wildfires and managing the wildfires. He's right about that, and he took advantage of the help the federal government gave, which New York and New Jersey did not manage to do.
Yeah, though I want, it's interesting though with California, because I'm thinking about as you're talking, because you mentioned DeSantis, Florida really opened up as quickly as they could. I mean, he really did a lot there. And including, something that made the news, I guess, yesterday or the day before, which is, you have in California, you have Disneyland, which, sent a stinging, rebuke back to California for their policy of what their plan is to let theme parks and places, outdoor places reopen, versus Disney World in Orlando, which has been doing things. They've been doing these procedures. They're nowhere near capacity, but they're able to put people back to work. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of workers at Disneyland in California that can't get back to work. And under the current plan of what the California government has, they won't go back. They can't go back to work. Really, they can't. The park cannot function with these stifling regulations that California's put out.
Right. That's right. And the other side of that is, like, I don't know if you noticed, if you saw this, but here in Fairfax County, the teachers union came out yesterday and said that they are signing a petition saying that they do not want to reopen schools at all this year. So I don't know how far that'll go. And that came a day after the superintendent put out a thing that was his new updated and slightly speeded up plan for reopening, right? They already have some people going back, but they were going to kind of accelerate it a little bit and try to get us fairly close to normal by Christmas. And now the teachers are saying, or the Teachers Association is saying, we don't want to come back at all this year, which I don't think that can hold. I don't even think in Fairfax they can put up with that.
Yeah, and I think, as a parent, I mean, and as someone whose kids are now grown myself, I mean, I still think that is a terrible disservice to the kids.
Yeah.
They need to be in class at least some of the time.
Yeah.
I could live as a parent, in theory, with a hybrid model for a while as you move towards normalcy. But the idea that you're just not going to return for the year and stuff like this, and there's no plan to do so. I mean, but to me, part of this with the Fairfax is that if they get away with this, if they're allowed to do this, I mean, they're the ones that are really then wind up controlling the situation. The parents will have no say. The superintendent, what's the use of the superintendent if the teachers union is going to just make the decisions in essence and control things?
Right, that's right. And they sign a contract that they would go to work when they're told to go to work. So if they don't go to work, I say get rid of it and hire some more.
Yeah, that's exactly
massive.
Right.
Firings, and the teachers are, you go to do that. Okay. Hey, wait a minute. Let's talk. Okay. All right. Yeah. Let's talk. Go back to work, and we'll talk. Right. You have some people who are 70, 75 years old still teaching, maybe make some accommodations for them. But, the idea that, this union is going to hold this whole county hostage is nonsense. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. And I think you too. I mean, we both probably have friends who are teachers. And we respect them and admire them. That's a heck of a job that they have to do. So I understand certain aspects of this, but like you just said, you signed a contract to teach. Therefore, you do this. And that obviously, most of these contracts were signed pre-pandemic, and it'll be very interesting actually to see what happens as contracts expire and they go up for another round of negotiation, which will eventually happen. What those contracts will look like. But, you mentioned the 70, 75-year-old teachers. I remember some of the older teachers when my kids were in elementary school. And a lot of them retired actually because of the curriculum that was being shoved down their throats that they didn't want, they didn't think they could be good teachers anymore as a result of that. So they quit.
You're going to say they retired because of Spencer,
but okay. Well, I'll make a note of that, Spencer. When I want you to come in at this part of the program and listen to what Brian just said about you. But they also. I mean, a lot of them have been teaching for a long time. They probably would qualify well for a pension. Maybe it's time to start thinking about the students at the point in time. Say, I know you love to teach. I respect you, but if you're afraid of think you could catch COVID or whatever, maybe it's time to turn this over to a younger generation. This is the ideal time.
You were 170,000 kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do we do? And, you got to remember, to this day, 21 and younger, there's about 130, 140 people in the United States have died of COVID. And 3/4 of them, or 2/3 of them are in the 18 to 21 group, and they have their average comorbidities is even higher than the older groups, right? So it's, in other words, it's very sick people who are already very sick by the age of 18 to 21. Okay, that's 2/3 of the 130 who have died at that age group. Of the 70 million school children in the United States, about 40 have died. So, to hold something off for something, 40 deaths out of 70 million, with all the negative effects that come from this, right? Because it's not, it's not like it's without penalty or without cost to make everyone stay home and do this, right? It's an enormous expense, and it's an enormous toll on the families, the kids, the teachers, the schools, right? The development. It's like, we were talking about this. I think we've talked about this earlier. I will turn 59 on Sunday. And, if your age 58 year gets messed up, whatever, right? 58, 57, 59, 53, it's all about the same, right? Basically, but if you're in school, my daughter's a sophomore in high school. She doesn't get to be a sophomore again. You're robbing her of her only chance. And, and all the things that come with being in high school, learning new things, finding out things you love and are passionate about. High school like shows you a bunch of different things you can get in and do and devote your life to, right? And that's how a lot of people find their career, find what they're going to do, find their place. And you're robbing them of that. I mean, they're getting taught, right? They're getting they're getting, the teacher is on the Zoom and everything. But a lot of what goes on in school is not happening because of this. And it's a tragedy to those kids, and it's not necessary. The people who are starting back, they're not having problems, right? There's no big spikes and people dying and all this stuff. This is created fear. One of my daughter's coaches told her yesterday what me and you have said. It was just, once November 4th gets here, a lot of these policies will be under review, right? Because it's just a lot. We all know that a lot of this is about, trying to blame Trump for the COVID and win an election.
Yeah, and there's a couple things in here too. I mean, one thing about on just like your daughter and other kids that are like her, that are being basically robbed of their time in high school or middle school or elementary school. It's not just the intellectual learning. I mean, the classroom learning, that type of thing. It's the social things that happen. Right. There are things that happen for little kids, and at every age level, you learn. There's good and there's bad in that. I mean, there's you can be bullied or you cannot be bullied, and you can find your first love, and you can be rejected or whatever. But it's part of life. It's all part of the building blocks and all of this stuff. And if you don't have that socialization, I think that's going to have a horrendously negative effect on us down the line, the longer this goes on. Now, also to the fear factor here is that, the media has been pounding away. Do you think it's working? I mean, do you think, like this second wave type of a thing like this, do you think it's working into the psyche of a lot of Americans and the voters in terms of how they're going to look at it? Now, granted, 28 million plus votes have already been cast. So that's sort of the die's already cast on that one, but still.
So I think that people's opinions of this are pretty hard now. I think that there's a lot of frustration that we're still out, that we're not back yet. And I think that this set of warnings is being widely ignored. I think people are looking at this and saying, so what? Unless you're pointing to me to many, many zillions of dead bodies, you're not changing my mind anymore, right? But I think people that, the idea of cases rising, generating a lot of fear, I think is over. I think that card's been played. And
yet, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I just kind of saw it in passing. I didn't read the whole thing. I think it was Breonna Keeler from CNN. I think she said the other day that there are 227,000 blah, blah, blah reasons not to vote for Trump, tying it directly to the number of deaths that Johns Hopkins reports, on a regular basis and stuff like that. Is that too much? Is that going too far?
What, to say that?
Yeah.
Okay. My question for that is, and I think, Trump sort of hit on this in the first debate. And I hope that he really hits on this Thursday night, because, they took out foreign policy as a topic in this and put COVID in because they think that's a topic that helps Biden and not Trump. But, you know, the question needs to be asked, 200,000, that's a terrible number of deaths. How many deaths should it been and why? And, you know, how do you show your work? You know, if you say it should have been half of that and we could have gotten half of that if we'd have only done X, Y, and Z, you know, show me that, right? Because right now, you know, the fact that they know is 200,000 people died, right? They don't know how many should have died. The original projections were 2.5 million, 2.2 million to 2.5 million. So, you know, my way of reckoning, we're less than 10% of what they said they expected to happen. That would say to me that that's a great American victory, you know, in fighting this disease, right? I mean, no one wants any of them to die, but, you know, to hold it to less than 10% of what they said was coming at you, you know, it strikes me as pretty good. Also, you know, the vaccine process is normally about 5 years, right? It's going to be done in about 7 or 8 months, right? Because, you know, they're ready to, they're very close to ready now. So, you know, I think it'll be, you know, I think if you're an undecided voter, right, and there are a few of them out there, and there is you know, we're now down to the part of the campaign where we're really going after them. I don't think that this kicks you into the Biden camp anymore. I think that people have learned that, you know, to get some distance from these figures, like, what does this mean? What should it have been? How could people have really, you know, what could have been done that could have saved a meaningful number of lives? I haven't heard it. If it's out there, tell us, you know, but I haven't heard it.
All right. So you just mentioned the debate, which is the perfect segue into the debate. So we have the final debate, which it was supposed to have been the third debate. So it's going to be the second debate. The moderator is Kristen Welker from NBC, for which I think there was an article in New York Post the other day that kind of listed the long history of her and her family's ties to the Democrats and things like that. Just as a reminder, which is a useful reminder about where her politics are, you know, in general. But then, you know, the questions that were released, there's been some, you know, the Trump campaign, Bill Stepien wrote what I thought was actually a pretty good letter to the Commission on Presidential Debates about the topics, about the lack of foreign policy, you know, discussion here and things like that, and what they agreed to, and everything. I mean, you kind of mentioned it earlier. I mean, you know, not having foreign policy in there is definitely a protective act for Joe Biden, right?
And it's because, you know, that's something that a president does that Congress really doesn't do, right? Congress gets involved at the funding level and so forth, but like the execution of foreign policy is reserved, you know, almost entirely to the president. That's where, you know, Trump is. You cannot argue that he has been an enormous success in foreign policy. Trade deals renegotiated, peace deals made that no one had been able to solve. You know, Bosnia, Kosovo, people don't realize like how bitter that conflict was, and to get them on the same page, you know, is incredible. You have planes going from Abu Dhabi to Jerusalem now, to Tel Aviv, to Ben Gurion Airport. That's never happened before since 1948 when Israel was founded. You know, these are breakthrough things that, you know, 8-10 administrations have worked on and gotten nowhere, and he got them done, right? We have NATO, people paying their fair share to NATO finally, right? Because, or, you know, for their own defense or whatever. But, you know, these are enormous moves that have been made in foreign policy, you know, and Biden can't match that. And the Obama administration can't match that, right? Their foreign policy record was mixed at best, you know, and plus, you know, two more things about that. One is, you know, you have to discuss it at some point, you know, it's one of these things, one of these questions, one of these segments has to be about it, right? That's a big part of the president's job, and it's no one else's job. And the second one is, you know, so if the Commission on Presidential Debates is going to position itself as being fair to both candidates, right? They've given in to Biden on making the second debate virtual. Then they canceled the debate when Trump, you know, said he didn't want to do it virtual. Then they have imposed this thing about mute buttons. He gets to talk, their whole 2 minutes uninterrupted, which I think they are going to rue the day they came up with that little idea, because I think Trump has a plan for that they will not like. Because then open discussion is open discussion, right? And he'll have 2 minutes full of Biden talking to refute, it'll be open season. So, it'll be interesting to see. But that's 3 big compromises. Plus you have 3 moderators, right? The second debate guy, it was so bad that he's basically lost his job over lying about being hacked, that he was, working with the enemy against Trump before the debate, right? It's clown car. You would think that somewhere along the line they'd say, okay, Trump campaign, since you are one of the candidates and now increasingly looking like the one most likely to win, you get a concession. We gave Biden all these concessions. You get one. Okay. What would you like your concession to be? Well, let's talk about foreign policy. Put a question in there. You're asking 6 questions, 8 topics, whatever it is. Make that one of them, right? But they don't do it. They run roughshod. They have to have every single topic, every single thing that can possibly tilt against Trump in any way, do it. They can't let up even one time. I think that's a grave error on the part of the Commission on Presidential Debates, is that they didn't give in on any points. They cannot characterize what they have done as fair to Trump in any way.
Yeah, and I was trying to think, and maybe because of your long history of being around here and knowing things, is just that, has there been in recent memory any time we've gone through a presidential campaign and had a debate or anything like this where foreign policy was not discussed at all, right?
Never.
I don't recall any. Yeah. And as you said, this is a very important part of the president's job. The American people need to hear about this, and we're not going to be talking about this. Right. This is incredible.
Solely to serve the political interest of one of the candidates. Solely for that reason.
Right. And there's been some criticism of the Commission on Presidential Debates. I see this as a dereliction of duty. If they're supposed to be doing this thing, this is really terrible on this. Now, it's interesting that I guess in response to Stepien's letter, former Senator John Danforth has written his own letter to rebut him and everything like this. But I think there's a lot of people, at least conservatives, are out there saying, like, what is the value of this commission at all anymore? I think right. The
Republicans, the people you put on there to defend the Republican point of view were, Olympia Snowe, who is very close to being a Democrat, about as close as you can come without changing your registration, and Spot, who said Danforth, who's called in Missouri, they call him Spot. Spot is the name of a dog.
Well, he was basically a moderate senator at best, right? When he was there.
There's no one there. There's no one there on Trump's side.
Right, and Frank Fahrenkopf, right, is the other guy. Yeah. These are all
squishes.
Rhino squishes. Yeah, this is the Bushy type or thing or something like that, right?
If it's 2 candidates, and it is 2 candidates. I'm sorry, Joe Jorgensen and whoever else is running. There are a bunch of them actually. Yeah. But this is, it's between Biden and Trump. And so someone, if you're going to have this thing, you're going to do it right. Someone on that commission has to advocate for that candidate, right? And because people are advocating for Biden, or you wouldn't have gotten the results or the moderators you got, right? So, no one's advocating for Trump. That's not right. That's not fair.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that they don't necessarily have to be, flag waving, table pounding Trump supporters, but they do need to advocate for the candidate, whoever the candidate is, for the Republican Party, right?
It's just unfairness. And if you can't do that, step aside, because someone needs, there's 3 of them, right? So somebody needs to get one of those 3 chairs who is adamantly defending the president, right? Because you can bet all 3 of the chairs on the other side are adamantly defending Biden, right?
So let me ask, this kind of made me think though, will we have a Commission on Presidential Debates 4 years from now? Will it look like it does now, or will it completely, with technology and lots of other things and all the stuff that happened this year, I'm just wondering, what's going to happen between now and then. Will it implode?
Well, I mean, I could see them looking to change it, but it's a situational thing. The situation will be completely different in 4 years.
Because I was listening to I listened to the Reagan Library podcast, and they replayed the a Mondale Reagan debate. And I had kind of forgotten. The League of Women Voters ran those debates back then. So yeah, it hasn't, in terms of who's been running it, that hasn't necessarily improved things any
No.
with regard to that. So what about Welker? I mean, were we going to expect her to be? Is she even going to come close to being down the middle?
No, because all the pressure on her is to hurt Trump all she can, especially now that there's all these, controversies out about Biden. Is like, protect that information from getting to the public and try to lay some gloves on Trump, because, they see what's going on. They know that, you look at the films of those rallies every day. Trump is going to 2 or 3 rallies a day, and there are crowds lined up for miles to get in. There are people Trump is talking to 100,000 people a day in person, and Biden is hiding in his basement. That can't not have an effect, right? So, and I was told that when the Biden stuff came out with his son, that California polling moved 11% in one day toward Trump. So
Wow.
that's a whopping change. And so I think people are seeing, and the efforts to characterize it as Russian misinformation, or have been, effectively strangled in the bathtub by the FBI and the intelligence community, and they're going to have to face the music on this, and I think voters realize that.
Strangled in the bathtub. Interesting. But before that, the thing I forgot, I meant to put this on the list because I did want to ask your opinion about, since we're talking about the debates tomorrow, but also what was your analysis, your feeling about the town halls last week? Because that happened, I guess, after we did our show, the day after, right? Last Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't had a chance to discuss that at all, but I did want to get your opinion about, Savannah Guthrie versus Donald Trump, and then George Stephanopoulos versus, Joe Biden.
Well, it was supposed to be a town hall where people could ask the candidate questions, right? Normal citizens. So, Biden's, undecided voter turned out to be a former Obama speechwriter. Is there really an Obama speechwriter who's an undecided on that?
It was identified as a communications some person or something,
and then in the Trump's debate, which was only an hour, Biden's was an hour and a half, so he had the last half hour to himself, which I thought was interesting. But Trump's debate, it was supposed to be citizens. There were 11 questions for citizens and 43 from the debate lady,
Savannah Guthrie,
who is really rude and not deep, right? She is very superficial in what she tried to push him on, and I don't know who they're trying to convert by treating Trump like this, but people look at it and they're like, "This is not fair to this guy." They don't let him talk. They don't let him get his point of view on.
Yeah, I mean, and what about, there was some talk about it now before they had that debate, when they scheduled that debate, or the town hall, I should say, when NBC scheduled that town hall, and it wound up being exactly opposite the ABC town hall, a lot of people, there apparently were people within NBC. There were some of the entertainers that appear on NBC. They criticized NBC heavily for doing this. They thought it was a terrible idea and a terrible thing to do. There were reports afterwards that, that Savannah Guthrie, part of the reason that she was tough on Trump too was to try to fight back against that criticism as well. Do you think there's anything in with it?
Yeah, it's probably, I mean, what was she going to do, right? Is she really going to go out there and give Trump a fair shake? She has never before. So, it's hard to assume that she would have in this situation.
All right. So then segue now to move on to the Hunter Biden emails. So you just mentioned this Russian disinformation. This is a big thing for like Adam Schiff and the Democrats. This was their big line of defense, right? It's Russian, disinformation campaign, here late in the campaign and all this. And then there was a report, I guess it was DOJ, FBI said, no, not true.
We've had it for a year, and we're looking at it, and we know we've gone through the check for Russian disinformation, and that's not what's going on here. You know,
This kind of,
something weird is going on here, because how does this guy leave his, laptop? You know, I mean, you ever left anything at a repair shop, taken something and like just slipped your mind that it was there? I mean, I don't know.
people do some things. I mean, the most common thing that people do when it is dry cleaning. Probably that's an
Yeah.
example in my mind. People take stuff to the dry cleaners and then completely forget they've done it.
Yeah.
And dry cleaners wind up selling it or whatever. I mean, they usually try to get recovery. Things like that will happen. But those usually aren't, they're shirts or coats or what. I mean, they're not, there's not a laptop. It's not
With
usually,
all that information on it,
right.
supposedly, I mean, the stuff that's coming out today, they're talking about, videos with him naked and 14-year-old girls being there, and who some of whom may be relatives, and I mean, I wouldn't put that laptop out to be fixed. I would have to like get someone I know to come over to my house and fix that, right? Because I'm not leaving that at Joe's Mac shop in Wilmington.
Yeah, no, I mean,
See what happens,
that part of it just reminded me of people who in the old days, use the Kodak Instamatic cameras or whatever, or just had film rolls, the old days of when people use real film, and they would take it in for developing at a CVS or a Photomat or, those old things. And they had some fairly embarrassing pictures on there because they weren't thinking that somebody's actually going to have to develop those pictures and we'll be seeing it. And if it's compromising photos and things with people you shouldn't be with, that it might leak out and things like this. I stepped back from this story initially because I wanted to see how it goes, because we hear a lot, we see a lot of stuff. It's late in the campaign cycle. I didn't want to jump on a bandwagon and make a big accusation.
Yeah,
but
I took a 2-day deep breath before.
Yeah, you just need to kind of, you're right. You have to take a little bit of a deep breath. But what have we seen since then? We've seen, first of all, we had Twitter and Facebook basically censor this article from the New York Post from being, circulated, right? The New York Post Twitter account got locked out. Kayleigh McEnany's account got locked out. Jack Dorsey came back from Twitter and said they made a mistake, and things like that.
Okay, then unlock the New York Post account.
Right, but then I saw a thing where there was a Biden surrogate who said, I guess on Fox News, that no one has said that these are inauthentic, right? And we haven't had an outright denial from the Biden family or the campaign, to my knowledge, right?
Maybe that has changed while we were on the air. Let me see. I thought I saw something.
And he's been basically, almost since the time this came out, we've heard almost nothing from Biden. He's kind of gone into hiding. We're not going to see him again really until Thursday night. It's been a little bizarre to me about this,
Yeah, it goes in the tank for 4 days because that's what you do when you're not guilty, right?
Right. I mean, this behavior is like, okay, I can't answer these questions. I don't want to answer these questions. So therefore, I'm just going to sequester myself until the debate.
Joe Biden denies that Hunter profited off his family ties. Is what this is saying.
But is that anything new that he hasn't said before, though? I mean,
there is no basis whatsoever, quote, that his son has profited off his family name with a Wisconsin TV show.
Well, I mean, it just seems that the movement is more towards the emails may be, all the stuff on there may be authentic after all, and this is going to be a big problem. I mean, I guess Joe Biden could still win the presidency with this stuff as an overhang, but it still calls into question the character and all these other issues and what happens afterwards.
I think Trump should make the point that, hey, when I became president, we spent the first 2 years investigating me, right? It was very hard to get anything done. The country couldn't move forward because we're waiting to hear this investigation play itself out. Okay, the investigation found I didn't do anything wrong. But if you elect Biden, the first 2 years of his administration are going to be spent investigating this, right? And he did do it, right? They do have the receipts on him. So
yeah, and do you find any double standard here? I mean, the media jumps over anything on Trump.
Right. Could you imagine if this was Don Jr.? right? Instead of
Right.
Hunter. Don Jr. is accused of this. Just plug his name into this story and see, what you would get. Think about what the reception, how the media would be treating this, right? 180 degrees different, not helping Biden lie about it, but working out every lead, But I don't, what I don't understand is how can every single reporter in DC think this is the way to go? Isn't there one person at one of these outlets that says, I could make my career if I just go and straight report the Biden campaign, if I just actually said what needed to be said about this campaign? Don't lie, don't make up stuff, don't tilt against them, just fairly cover it, fairly ask them the questions. Fair. There's one guy at CBS who tries to do it sometimes, but they don't use him much and they scold him when he does it and so forth. But don't you think at some point someone's going to take a chance and just say, I have a chance to make my reportorial career here by truly exposing what's going on here, because it's horrible and it's only going to get worse. I mean, they've got a bunch of stuff. The other thing is like, the Ghislaine Maxwell, was not able to get her statement to police suppressed. So it will be made public in the next couple of days. It's going to have some Republican names on it too, but they're not going to be people tied to Trump all that much. And it's going to have a lot of Democrat names that they don't want getting out. Pompeo says he has Hillary's 33,000 emails that we've never seen and plans to release those in coming days. So there's a lot coming down at Biden. And the business partner guy who's in prison, who they've moved from his prison cell. Do you know about this? One of the guys who was a business partner of Hunter Biden went to jail with the federal prison for some of what they were doing. And, he has turned over all his stuff to Peter Schweizer, the investigative reporter. And he is talking and explaining what was going on and putting Hunter into all kinds of other problems. And Joe, and establishing a direct link between Joe and these extractions of money from foreign governments and promises of influence and meetings and so forth. And this guy, they moved him out of he was in prison in Oregon, and they moved him, and they're keeping him in a safe house because he's giving information and his life is being threatened.
So, during the debate on Thursday, I mean, if Trump can find a way to talk to, mention Hunter Biden to Joe and talk about that and try to get him to make some comments. I mean, if Joe Biden just comes out and declares none of this is true, he never probably, kind of the standard talking points, is that effective enough? I mean, or is Trump going to score some points here if he hits him on that? I mean, is that one of Trump's better weapons in this debate, is to kind of bring up the Hunter Biden thing?
Right. See, and that it's going to come out, and a lot of it's, save 10 for the big guy, right? He's the big guy. So he's going to have to explain not just his son's actions, but his own actions in this. And I think it's going to be hard for him because, Trump's got the receipts. He's got the information, and I don't see how, and I can't imagine him not asking him, right, and not working it in somewhere. And what this format is, so it's 2 minutes Trump talks uninterrupted, 2 minutes Biden talks uninterrupted. Trump, if they go to cut his mic, then we're all going to know, right? If they cut his mic, this election is over. Trump wins 45 states, right? They cannot cut his mic. So whatever he says in his 2 minutes, America will hear, right? You can't stop it. And because last time, people, they blame Trump for all the interruptions, but the most consequential interruptions in that debate were Biden and the moderator, Chris Wallace, interrupting Trump when Trump was making key points. So, there's no shield from that in this format. And open, once they get past, each one has 2 minutes, right? Then it's open discussion, and the moderator's not a part of it. Biden will have to fend for himself. That I think that they are, they're walking into a snake pit.
Yeah, and I still think that's kind of where the mistake was in that first debate too, is that Trump should have let Biden speak more, because to me, the more that Biden actually is forced to talk, the worse it gets for him. over an
Right.
extended period of time. So that's why this format, this actually may work. I mean, I mean, they'll cut the mics, I guess, from a TV perspective, but even if Trump is speaking with the mic off, if you're in that hall or whatever, I guess you'll still hear it. He can still
Right.
kind of,
What is TV going to show? It's going to be the split screen, right?
yeah.
Biden here, Trump here. So if Biden says something that's not true and Trump goes wrong, does it matter that Trump's mic is cut? Not really, right?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I mean, if he's making expressions or he's mouthing the words wrong, and all that, people are going to be able to tell that.
Right.
So they won't need to hear it. They'll actually be able to
They'll
read the
know,
lips.
yeah.
Yeah, they'll read that action. Yeah, that's a good point. So apparently Trump has done this interview for 60 Minutes with Leslie Stahl, which has attracted quite a bit of attention. Like apparently Trump has threatened to release the video before Sunday. He also, according to news reports, he stormed out of there. He didn't like the tenor or the tone of Leslie Stahl's questions and things like that. I mean, what have you seen? What do you know? I mean, what are we expecting on this interview? And
I don't know what the bone of contention is, and I don't think it's been reported yet. But I think what he is saying is, I'm going to put out, what really happened. So if they try to, deceptively edit this in any way, you're going to know up front, right? And I think it's kind of a existential crisis for 60 Minutes. I don't know what it is, but what it strikes me as is that they may have gone a little far on the bias, and they may be about to get, where they have to answer for their crimes on it. People are going to be able to decide for themselves, was this played straight or was this unfair?
Yeah, you know what this reminds me of though? So I'm going to go way back in the history of accuracy in media, and it goes back to the days of 3 Mile Island and all the fuss about nuclear power plants in this country. And 60 Minutes went during all that stuff, all the protests about nuclear power plants and so they went to Illinois and they went to a company that was then called Illinois Power, which I think now it may be Exelon now, and they had several nuclear power plants. They were having the same issues virtually every other operator had, which was cost overruns and some other things like that. But it was also a very clean and efficient fuel, right? I mean, it was the cheapest fuel, source of like electricity you could get. So they went in there and they did this, segment. Those guys, the PR guys for Illinois Power, were some of the smartest people we had met up to that point in time, because they filmed side by side with 60 Minutes. And then they waited. And so the 60 Minutes kind of hatchet job came out, the 15, 20-minute segment. And then Illinois Power created their own version of this. They had a guy dressed in a suit. They had like the stopwatch thing, kind of thing going there. And they based 60 Minutes their version. And they basically did a side by side. Here's what you saw. Here's what you didn't see. And it changed the entire story, the scope of the story, because, statement, the remaining part of like a CEO statement, defending this, they just cut it to meet the soundbite requirement, what they wanted to portray, and the other meat of it was left out. And it was one of the most brilliant pieces of PR. So I can kind of see that, I'm crossing my fingers that maybe this is what the White House was doing, was that, they were ready for this, their film, if they film basically everything that 60 Minutes film, let's see what they edited it down to. And then they've got everything else and they can say, oh, but wait a minute, this is how they cut it, but this is what they left out. That'll be extremely effective, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it'll come out in time to make a difference.
Right, because we still have time. I mean, it's only going to be a week or 9 days at that point in time. But I'm sure they could turn that around, and get that ready for Sunday night, Monday morning if they needed to, if they had something good to go out there and roll with. So I'll be very curious as to how that's going to turn out in the.
Yeah, I'm interested to see like what the deal is there. What's he bad about? And what do they have on it?
Right. All right. Moving on. Stimulus. So this is going back and forth, and I don't know. I mean, I think there's some people may even have stimulus fatigue for all the time that this has been talked about. We thought maybe something might have happened before the recess, but Pelosi was asking for way too much. McConnell wants something in a lower dollar amount. It looks like Trump is trying to trying to, throw a little bit more election stuff out there that he was saying. I think he made a statement that, we'll give more money than Nancy Pelosi wants or whatever, but they seem to be stuck at like 1.88 trillion versus 2.2 trillion, and things about testing. There's Pelosi says it's about testing and other things, but there are other reasons. There are other things in there
Well,
too.
it's about making voter ID illegal, and it's about a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with COVID. And the Republicans are not going to support that bill until it comes out of there, right?
Right.
They're right. I mean, you saw Wolf Blitzer, took Nancy Pelosi down hard on that. The Wolf Blitzer of all people. It's like, yeah, see the people out begging in the street. You're not doing anything to help them. And he's like, well, we feed them. We know them. Like, well, then, make a deal here. You're doing their talking points. It's like, okay, but.
Yeah, I mean, when Nancy Pelosi is now teaching me that Wolf Blitzer is a Republican apologist,
yeah,
of all things, you're just like,
you can try that story, but I'm not sure how far you're going to get with that one.
That's another example of how wacky 2020 has become, right? This year is when Nancy Pelosi is calling Wolf Blitzer a Republican apologist. He's like, this year is really going off the rails. But what about what about Mitch McConnell? Mitch McConnell, for all his faults, and there are a lot of conservatives who don't like McConnell for a lot of different reasons, but he's trying to hold some fiscal responsibility there and saying like, look, that's just too much money. He wants something smaller. And all
he
of
wants
this.
it targeted. I think the important point is not so much the price tag, is like what are we spending that $400 million on?
Right.
And that's the stuff they want out of the bill. So it's like, they talk about the price tag because it's the easiest part to understand. But what he's trying to do is say, give us a bill that's about COVID relief. It's not about Democrat political priorities and an election fixing. Give us a bill that solves the problem that we're trying to solve with this bill.
Right. And I think this is a good point about McConnell. I mean, it's just that I'm fine with targeted relief. Give me something, if you want to give money to the airline industry and to things that are suffering that still need to be propped up for a little while, fine. But like every politician, particularly Democrats, they stuff this thing through. Like, oh well, we call it the CARES Act or HEROES Act and whatever. But by the way, we're going to throw this in, we're going to throw that in. We have a lot of pet projects and things we want to do, and so it just grows into this behemoth. So I'm glad that Mitch McConnell is trying to show some responsibility and hold the feet to the fire, because I think this is also the way of exposing Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats for who they really are. Because they talk, just like you said, Bob Wolf Blitzer, oh, we feed people, we do all this stuff. No, if you were really interested in helping the people, you would get this bill passed. You would figure this out, and just throw out all this stuff. You're going to, in all likelihood, you're probably going to retain control of Congress. You can always bring up another one, because they will. If Biden wins the presidency, I think the sky's the limit on the spending in the end. Coming up on all of this. Amy Coney Barrett's vote coming up on Monday.
Right.
This is a great thing. I mean, I think the importance of having 9 justices was just driven home to us with that Supreme Court ruling on the voting, the mail-in ballot voting counting in Pennsylvania, right?
Right, that's right. So it was a 4-4 vote, which left the appeals court decision intact that lets Pennsylvania count votes for several days after the election. I don't think that's going to end up mattering. I think that Trump will be declared the winner of Pennsylvania on election night and the entire election on election night. But, it's just another way of like trying to string this out and, introduce possibilities to steal the election and cheat, right? They don't want, this is not about fairness. This is about cheating. This is about getting Democrats more opportunities to cheat.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that really bother me about this, beyond the fact that they're getting like an extra 3 days, for this, is that they're saying that they are to be counted even if the postmark is illegible. Okay. Now, if you can't tell what the postmark, and if you can't tell what the postmark really is, okay, well, we're not sure, so we're counting it.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
this is ridiculous. This is definitely this is just an extension of Democrats and ballot harvesting and all of this type of thing like this. For which I also want to say it was interesting because I think we may have touched on this a little bit last week about California. The Republican Party apparently had these ballot boxes,
Right.
out in California, and the Democrats went, just really crazy about this. But as I understand, they actually got a favorable ruling on this, that those ballot boxes, can stand. They can't say official on them as long as they're manned and somebody is there, right? They have to have somebody there at the box to accept it and everything like this. But those ballot boxes are now, they're valid as
Yeah.
long.
Which is a big problem for Democrats because they're like in gun shows and
Right.
stuff where right wingers are going to be the only ones there, right? So
Yeah, I don't know what Republican thought that up, but I want to give them
that
5 gold stars,
was
whatever.
a troll for the ages there.
Yeah, isn't that great? I mean,
California.
the Democrats use ballot harvesting and they flipped seats in California 2 years ago. The Republicans have somebody there figured this out and was brilliant in this. And the Democrats are, oh no, you can't do that. It's like, and exactly what's the difference between what's going on here and what you did 2 years ago? I'd say what the Republicans are doing here is far more valid than what the Democrats did.
Right.
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 It's unbelievable. All right, we're 2 minutes.
2 minutes. So it appears that the Pope this morning has said that he supports civil unions of same-sex marriages. The gospel last Sunday in the Catholic churches in the United States was the story of oh gosh, now it's left my mind. The story of render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, under God what is God. And I think this falls into that category. The Pope's taking a lot of heat because he's, seems to be on the left and so forth. But, the church is not endorsing this, right? The church is saying, marriage is better than non-marriage, which I believe is true, in these situations. And if these people feel that level of commitment, and they're not going to change, they're not going to become straight, right? They're going to do what they're going to do. Then a civil union, a thing, established by the state rather than the church, is preferable to them not being allowed to get married. I think that makes sense. I think that's one of those ones. It's like he said before. It kind of goes with this theme. He had said before that we should not, gay people come to Catholic churches, you welcome them in. He's not endorsing gay behavior, but what he's saying is, it's not your job to judge. It's God's job to judge. And if these people are seeking God, then, you don't stand in their way, right? That's not your job as a Christian to stand in their way. Your job is to accept and love people, right? That's what the Bible says for you to do. So I think it's more in line with that and slightly less than meets the eye. Also, you had something down here that we didn't get to about that some of these Republicans that Biden is talking to for cabinet posts, Flake, Kasich, people that, basically Trump ruined one way or the other. I don't know who you think will come your way and vote over that, but the people who are skeptical of you are also skeptical of them. So, he can do it if he wants, but I don't think he gets a lot of votes out of it.
Yeah, I don't see. Yeah, you're right about that. I don't see how that really helps him get a lot of votes. I mean, I think the people that, if there are Democrats that like or respect Kasich or Flake, they're already on Biden's camp. But the progressive left, that's not their cup of tea. That's not the kind of people that they want to see in the cabinet. That's not their, they want progressive lefty types, from top to bottom as much as they can get in there to push forward their agenda. Kasich and Flake would not, they're not progressives. I mean, they just don't like Trump.
Right.
They
basic thing. The other thing is some of these early votes are getting counted or accounted for. Trump looking real good in Florida, looking way better than expected in Pennsylvania, way behind in Ohio, though, which is kind of curious. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And then to your point about the Pope, this is always one of those, I think in religion, we're seeing more of a movement in this with mainstream religion and the acceptance of homosexuals, in the churches, and then whether or not they're in official marriages or they're in civil unions or whatnot. And I think a lot of that has boiled down to there's a sinner and there's a sin, and you have to judge things, and so my church, if gay people show up to church, we will, we don't condemn them, we welcome them. That's fine. Behavior wise, if they're practicing certain behaviors, there are certain things they wouldn't qualify for in the LDS church. But other than that, that doesn't mean they can't participate in other activities.
Right.
So, and I don't, and frankly, unless somebody came up to me and said they were gay, I probably wouldn't know it. It's not something I'm generally. I don't have what people used to say as a gaydar or anything like that. I don't look at people like that. I'm not trying to judge people like that. And it's not our position to be judging others, right? For that.
That's right.
So anyway, all right. Well, thank you once again, Brian, for joining me today. And thank you everyone, our marvelous, illustrious audience out there. Please always stay safe and stay well during these times. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not ever, ever, ever let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America. We will see you again next week, and I'll be posting this to YouTube later today. Last time it said